Chapter 43. Fred and George met Harry in the back room of the shop. They'd been taking care of what they needed to do there during the press conference, listening to it on the wireless as they did. They flew one by one to headquarters and found themselves in the middle of the Inquisition. Hermione was the first to get to Harry and immediately slapped him hard before anyone else could react. The twins banished her and everyone else to get some room and set up quick barrier wards in front of them and Harry while Sirius and Remus tried to calm everyone down. "How dare you work with that monster?" Marley cried out, echoed by a few others. At least most of them seemed torn. "How dare you work with the monster Dumbledore?" Harry shot back. "Headmaster Dumbledore was not a monster," Hermione yelled. "He was a great man." "Was he?" Harry sneered. "I see you may need an in-person demonstration since you apparently didn't believe the wireless." He pulled out the ring and called Dumbledore. Before the old man could say anything, Harry said, "You will speak nothing but the truth here today. Professor Dumbledore, tell us it's all a lie, that you would never do those awful things," Hermione said desperately. "Alas, I cannot, Miss Granger. I have been forbidden to lie." It took a second for her to wrap her head around it. "Then you had a good reason for everything you did." "I believe I did, yes. Everything I did was for the greater good," Dumbledore said sadly. "There, see, he had a good reason," Hermione said smugly. "The greater good of who?" Harry asked pointedly. "I don't know," Dumbledore had to admit, "but the world surely would have been better with me in charge." He lost most of the Order with that statement, but those few who still believed in him did so with even more devotion. "Clearly you believe that, but it doesn't make it true," Harry said. "Did you know that Marley Weasley was stealing from my vault, and did you help her? I advised her not to empty the vault until the day before your birthday each year, so that it wouldn't be noticed before it was refilled. I made sure she was on the authorized list as your magical guardian. I also paid Ronald, Hermione, and Ginevra out of your vault for their services in keeping you loyal to me and keeping me informed." That was the last question Harry had for him that he hadn't wanted to ask at the press conference. He didn't want the other Weasleys to be dragged through the mud. Ginny love potioning him was already public after what happened at school, so he hadn't been worried about that part. Now that you see for yourself that what happened at the press conference wasn't a trick, does anyone have any other questions for him? Were you involved with the love potion that Marley has been feeding me? Arthur asked, getting gasps from the entire room. "I started the dosing myself during your 7th year and taught her how to make my recipe, which gradually increases the feelings and so is less noticeable," Dumbledore had to answer. "Why?" Arthur asked. "Because Septimus Weasley refused to support me. The Weasley family was poor, but had a great deal of influence. The Prewitt family had always supported me, so when Marley Prewitt wanted you so badly that I caught her brewing her own love potion, I helped her in return for her turning the Weasley family, through you, to my side. My father and brothers were killed soon after Marley and I married. Did you have anything to do with that? Your branch of the Weasley family had to be the only one, so I had them killed and blamed Voldemort. When exactly did Voldemort start killing?" Harry suddenly felt the need to ask. "Just before you were born," Dumbledore told him. "The part of the prophecy that I had leaked to him filled him with enough fear that he made 3 more Horcruxes over the course of 3 months and lost his hold on his sanity." "Did you know that Pettigrew was a Death Eater?" Sirius asked. "Yes. I turned him towards them myself. I needed to get the prophecy child out of the way." "Then you knew I was innocent when I was thrown into Azkaban," Sirius said. "Why?" "Because if you were free, you would have claimed custody of Harry. You would have raised him to be strong and independent. I would have been unable to mold him into sacrificing himself." "You bastard! We believed in you." Tonks was the first to break, and that started a run on the verbal abuse. Marley and Hermione had been silenced to keep them from constantly interrupting with denials and defense. Harry let it go on for a minute before giving George a pleading look. George put his fingers in his mouth and let out a piercing whistle. "Thank you, George. Now if no one has any more questions." No one spoke, but there were plenty of glares at the spectre, so Harry just released him and put the ring back in his pocket. That done, Fred turned to his father. "You were being love potioned, and you knew about it?" he asked in horror. "Yes, I found out not long after you two were born. I would not leave my children. Since then I've been taking it willingly to keep the home happy and peaceful," Arthur said. "Dad, here," Bill said, pulling a purging potion from his belt. As a curse breaker, he was always prepared for any eventuality and had a belt full of shrunken potions. Bill, Ginny is the only one out of age, and she will be next summer. You've raised us all well, and your sacrifice won't be forgotten. It's time for you to be free, Dad. Here, here, George agreed with uncharacteristic seriousness. Most definitely, Fred added. I agree, Dad. You've gone above and beyond. You've done your best for us. It's time for you to have your own life, Charlie said. He was set to go back to Romania the next day, but he'd been here for the wedding. Arthur looked at Ron and Ginny for their opinions, but if he was truly honest with himself, he cared less about theirs than the others. They had clearly taken more after their mother if they were willing to steal from Harry and use love potions on him. When neither of them objected, though they didn't look too happy about it, he took the purging potion from Bill's hand and walked upstairs. He knew what was coming and would at least hold onto that much of his dignity. The person who silenced Marley and Hermione thought it was safe now to undo it, but that was a mistake. Then again, it would have to have come out eventually. Harry James Potter, not only did you steal my money and my children's money, but now you've cost me my husband too. I stole nothing and cost you nothing, Harry said coldly. I took back what was rightfully mine, most of it at least. You still came out 3,000 galleons ahead, more than enough to pay you back for any expenses for the short times I stayed in your home. We'll pay you back that 3,000, Harry, Bill said seriously. No, you won't, Harry shook his head. It's not about the money. It never was. It was about the trust that they broke. The rest of you didn't, and you owe me nothing. That's why I told the goblins to stop with their personal vaults, not to touch the vaults of any other Weasleys to cover the difference. The guilty have been punished. That's the end of it. We tried to, George told him. He gave us the same answer, Fred added. Told us if we transferred the gold to him, he would transfer it right back, and double it. And that goes for you too, Bill, Harry chuckled, and any other Weasley that didn't have a hand in the theft. We treated you like family. How could you do this to us? Hermione asked tearfully. Family doesn't lie, steal, and spy on each other, Harry snapped. Oh, but wait, you erased your own parents' identity and sold everything they owned, so I guess maybe that is family to you. You what? Tonks asked incredulously. How could you? I thought they would be safer, but they would never have gone themselves. I did it to save them, Hermione said. So you punished them because they wouldn't leave their daughter behind in a potential war zone. Hester Jones asked. You should have just gone with them if you wanted them to leave so badly, someone else added. I couldn't. Ron and I were supposed to go with Harry and collect the Horcruxes so we could kill Voldemort. How was I supposed to know that Harry would turn traitor? She scowled at him. So self-righteous, Harry scoffed, seeing the agreement in the rest of the Order's faces. If I were you, I would go catch up to them. You're not going to last very long in this new world with your attitude. Speaking of Voldemort, Harry, are you sure about him? Tonks asked worriedly. She hadn't gone back to work since they got word of the takeover, too afraid of what would happen to her. Chapter 44. I'd like to know the answer to that too, Arthur said as he came down the stairs looking a bit pale and weak. But first, he pulled his wand. I, Arthur Septimus Weasley, hereby divorce Marley Ann Weasley and cast her out of the Weasley family as an oath breaker. There was a flash around both Marley and Arthur. Ronald and Ginny, you are old enough to choose who to live with. Marley, you have 24 hours to move your belongings out of the burrow. The wards will prevent you from taking or destroying anything that doesn't belong to you personally. Now that she had been declared an oath breaker to the Weasleys, the wards were against her. And you have 24 minutes to remove yourself and your belongings from my house, Sirius said coldly. Ronald, Ginevra, and Hermione, you have the same. I will not abide those who betray my godson. The four people in question knew exactly what Sirius' words meant. That the wards would forcefully eject them if they weren't out in time, so they scrambled from the room. They had packing to do. Harry motioned for Fred and George to take down their wards and said, Since the dangerous ones are gone, why don't we take this party to the kitchen and have lunch? You especially Mr. Weasley need to sit down and eat something. Yes, I suppose I should, Arthur said weakly, supported on either side by Bill and Charlie. Darby, Harry called. When the elf arrived, he asked, How soon can you have a simple lunch for? He looked around and got a head count. 32. Darby have in 10 minutes, Darby promised and disappeared. Creature had dropped dead when he found the locket missing, so Sirius didn't have an elf anymore. Darby had been helping him out since Harry didn't have nearly enough work for the little guy. All his properties had their own elves. Once they were sitting at the table and Arthur had been given a glass of water, Harry addressed the question from before. You asked how sure I was about Tom, and I'll tell you that I'm very sure. We have talked in depth about his plans and his past. He's personally tutored me in a number of subjects during the summers, so I know the man pretty well. We've also been in daily contact during that time, first through letters, and the last year and a half through linked journals the twins created. You're absolutely certain that I won't be arrested or killed for stepping foot back into the ministry? Arthur asked worriedly. You will be questioned, which might feel like an arrest. As long as you tell them you're willing to work peacefully with the new administration, you'll be free to get back to work. If you don't, they'll just fire you. I am absolutely certain that you won't be harmed or arrested unless you attack first, Harry said seriously. Same for all of you. What's past is past. We're all working towards a better future here. We've been working with Harry and Tom for the last 2 years too, Dad, and I promise you we wouldn't let you go back to work if we thought you were in danger, George told him. But you'll probably end up having to change jobs, assuming you want to stay working there, Fred added. Why? Arthur asked confusedly. No offense, Mr. Weasley. I have the greatest respect and admiration for you, but you really know nothing about Muggles. The head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office really needs to know about Muggles, Harry said apologetically. So I'm to be fired either way, Arthur said sadly. Not at all, Harry shook his head. Tom and I talked about you specifically. He's actually planning to promote you, give you a bigger department, assuming you decide to stay. Promote me? Why? Arthur asked incredulously. Because, in his words, you have experience as a department head and are relatively incorruptible and a good work ethic. It would also show any dissenters that he is willing to make a fresh start and work with anyone willing to work with him, Harry told him. There are going to be a lot of shake-ups, Fred told him. People shuffling between departments. Some departments getting bigger, others scaling back. People will be put where they can work to their strengths, to make everything more efficient. And if you truly want your old job back, you can take classes to learn about Muggles, and he'll give it back to you once you're qualified, Harry finished for the twins. You really think his ideas are for the best? Daedalus Diggle asked worriedly, wringing his hands. I really do, Harry nodded. The insane megalomaniac Voldemort is dead. The brilliant revolutionary Tom Riddle is back, and I can't wait to see the world that he's going to create. That's good enough for me, Sirius threw his weight in. As the one who was the most vehement against Voldemort, that was enough to get agreements from everyone else. Mr. Potter, McGonagall made her first foray into the conversation. She'd been so taken aback by what had been learned about Albus, and so ashamed of what she'd allowed to happen, and even helped to happen, that she hadn't dared say a word. I would like to offer my sincere apologies for my part in Albus' plans. I, like so many others, believed in him. We should not have. Professor, there are so many places, just that I know of, that any reasonable person would have taken a step back and questioned what they were doing. You never did, and I and many others suffered for it. That said, as I stated before, the past is the past, and I hold you no ill will. I only hope that, going forward, you allow your own conscience to be your guide and follow no one blindly. I assure you, Mr. Potter, I will do so, she vowed. Now that she had some semblance of forgiveness, she felt free to ask questions. Did you truly agree to place Professor Snape as headmaster? I did, Harry nodded. He and I came to an accord back in my 5th year. We've just been keeping up appearances in public since then. While he was an awful teacher, he was at least partially hamstrung by circumstances beyond his control. The important thing is that he truly cares about the students, their safety, and their education. He's throwing his whole support behind the changes that Tom and I are making, and in all of our discussions on the matter, the well-being of the students has been his only concern. Will I still have a job? She asked concernedly. That's up to the headmaster, Harry said. All staffing decisions are in his hands. I don't see why you wouldn't, though. You have always been an excellent teacher, regardless of any disagreements on your political views. If Tom Riddle can promote Arthur Weasley, Snape's not likely to fire you, he chuckled, and the whole table laughed with him, including McGonagall. Does this mean we're disbanding the Order? Tonks asked. There's not really any need for it anymore, Remus said. All in favor. Sirius suggested a vote, and it passed unanimously. Great. Now, if you'll all excuse us, we'd like to go celebrate his coming of age with our boyfriend, Fred said with a smirk. So we'll see you all tomorrow, or in a few days. Harry blushed brightly, but didn't seem to object in the slightest. You'll see us tomorrow night when we throw Harry a birthday party here, Sirius said Mark sternly. Aye, Mr. Padfoot, sir. George saluted playfully before the three of them moved towards the flue, still laughing. Chapter 45. Severus Snape, like most of the world, was listening to the press conference on the wireless. He just had too much to do to attend, even if he did enjoy the crowds. He had no intention of attending the Order meeting afterwards either. It was likely to devolve into complete idiocy and pandemonium. He had no desire to remonstrate with a dead man, at least not with so many witnesses. Should he attempt to tell them of the new minister's virtues, he would likely be cast as a traitor. Potter could weather that particular storm much better than he. All those things, however, were little more than excuses for the fact that he didn't have time to go. While he couldn't do anything overt with his new position yet, there were still 100 things he could do to prepare. It was during the press conference that his attention was caught during the talk of the changes at Hogwarts, and as he heard his name announced as the new headmaster, he felt the wards shift to him. It seemed that just being publicly announced by the founder's heirs was enough for magic to recognize it. Snape wasn't wasting any time. He stepped into his private rooms, shrunk the trunks he already had packed and waiting, and put them in his pocket before moving back to his office. He placed the stack of parchment he was working on at the top of the box that was mostly packed, tucked it under his arm, and grabbed the stack of letters that he had finished writing, waiting for this moment to go out. On his way to his new office, he stopped by the owlery and sent off 40 letters. Most were to people specifically invited to interview for a variety of the positions, and one was to the Daily Prophet, taking out an advert for the next morning with the available positions and procedures to apply. He had already asked Tom to send anyone at the ministry who couldn't cut it, but would be an adequate teacher his way, especially any auras for the defense position. Letters sent, he made his way towards his new office and made a mental note to see if the entrance could be moved. When he approached the gargoyle, it immediately stepped aside, recognizing him as the new headmaster. He didn't bother setting a password yet. There were no students here, and teachers could bypass it anyway. He was glad to see that Dumbledore's belongings had already been cleaned out, and quickly sent a sleeping hex at his portrait. It would take time for it to wake after his death and might not do so for months still, but he didn't want to take the chance of being distracted. He unshrunk his trunks and set them to the side, set his office box on the desk, pulled out the stack of parchment, and continued where he left off. He would unpack and settle in later, when he had time. During the almost 2 weeks he had to prepare, he had, in addition to considering people to court for the positions available, also finished the code of conduct for both students and teachers, what would become a part of the new student handbook. Now he was working on modifying the course aims and overall syllabi. The specifics of the syllabi would be done by the teachers themselves, but he would be the one to set what was taught in general. Most of them required only minor tweaking to account for the dark magic and critical thinking skills. Some required a complete overhaul, including Muggle studies and history. Then there were the new classes, critical thinking and wizarding studies, that had to be built from the ground up. He had just finished the modifications to the ones that only required minor changes when there was a knock at his door. "Enter," he called. "Headmaster." Minerva nodded her head respectfully as she came in. "Ah." Returned from the Order meeting. "Is there anything that I should be aware of?" Snape asked. "The Order has been disbanded, and with few exceptions, everyone is giving this new regime a chance," Minerva told him. The rest of the meeting, so to speak, was simply the airing of dirty laundry and chaos. "I expected as much, hence why I chose not to attend," Severus nodded. "Since you have returned, if you would, call all staff for an immediate staff meeting. We will begin as soon as everyone has arrived." When she left to do so, he took his stack of parchment once again, along with 15 copies of the code of conduct he'd created, into the staff room and sat at the head of the table to await the staff. He continued making notes and flipping through other pages for reference as he waited, simply nodding in welcome to each person as they came in. No one was asking questions or even talking much at all. Between the fact that they were nervous enough at Snape being headmaster in the first place, and the fact that he was clearly very busy, and even the first years would know better than to interrupt the man when he was busy, they just filed in silently and took their seats. Minerva had entered last with Trelawney, who she'd retrieved from her tower, and Severus set his quill down and asked her, "Close the door if you would, Minerva." She did so before taking her seat to his right, as was her place as deputy. Even if that would be changing during this meeting, as she suspected it would. Severus called a house elf for tea and refreshments and said, "Straight to business. We have a great deal of work to do in the next month before school reopens. I don't know how much of the press conference each of you heard and the general statements about the changes happening here, but you should still hear them from me regardless. To begin with, no one is being fired." The whole room relaxed at that, Hagrid especially, so he continued. "That said, most of you will be seeing a shift in your jobs. To begin with, Minerva, Pomona, and Phileas, you will no longer be heads of house." There were gasps around the room that he ignored. "I have here a copy of the charter and bylaws of Hogwarts. It is impossible, without use of a time-turner or other such device, to carry out the proscribed duties of a head of house and teach at the same time. Unlike previous headmasters that shall not be named, I will be holding each and every employee to the duties proscribed by these documents. I will also ensure that you all have copies of them so there is no confusion." "What duties are we not carrying out as head of house?" Phileas asked with a frown. "At a minimum, a head of house is required to do head counts of their students each day at curfew. Are required to host weekly house meetings, a minimum of 2 yearly individual meetings with every student, and monthly or even weekly meetings, if necessary, with students who are struggling in any classes. They are to be available to their students 24/7 in case of any problems ranging from bullying to issues with a teacher to personal problems. They are the advocate for their students should they have problems with any other members of staff. They are, in essence, their parents here at the school." "I see what you mean about it being impossible to do with teaching duties on top of it," Pomona admitted. "Should any of you wish to be head of house rather than teachers, let me know in writing by Christmas, and we will attempt to make the change for next year. But with at least 25 new staff to hire, I need you more in your teaching positions for this coming year," Severus told them. "Now, I would like to take a moment to say that any of you who wish to tender your resignation, do so now or at least by tomorrow. I will be unhappy if I have to begin the job search all over again to fill yet more vacancies." When no one spoke, he nodded and continued. Hopefully by the end of the meeting, people wouldn't change their minds. "Next is the deputy position. That will also not be held by a teacher for the same reason. Their duties will not allow the time available. That is a standalone job. Now for the bigger issues. Charity, you will no longer be the Muggle studies teacher. You will be teaching the first 4 years of history." "But why?" she asked plaintively. "Because, frankly speaking, you know nothing of Muggles," he said bluntly. He, like Tom, was not one for platitudes and wasting time to spare someone's feelings. There was a reason that Harry had chosen to break his news to Arthur. Some of the biggest achievements they have made to date, Muggles have been to space and walked on the moon. In my childhood, their cars, owned by nearly every adult Muggle, can go faster than the firebolt. They're heavier than air flight, can now carry hundreds of people at a time all around the world, and some of their aircraft can go faster than the speed of sound. They have weapons that can reduce entire cities the size of London to dust and poison the air for hundreds of miles around with simply the push of a button. They have handheld weapons that can kill as many as 100 people per second. They have technology to record everything going on around them and display the images similar to a pensieve in every Muggle home. These recording devices cover a large number of public areas as well and are monitored by their law enforcement. And that is only a fraction of the things that they are capable of.